Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today we welcome Matt Burns from Smartpunk Records to the podcast. Matt talks about his history in the Florida music scene, Smartpunk's transition from distribution to record label, navigating the rise of streaming, offering their in-house manufacturing services to a wider audience, and more. So many of my favorite conversations are just talking with like-minded people, and so I really enjoyed getting to hang out with Matt. Thanks so much for checking out As the Story Grows. If you're brand new to the podcast, welcome and thank you for listening. If you aren't subscribed, I would love it if you subscribed on your podcast platform of choice. You can find links in the show notes or at asthestorygrows.com to our Discord server. You can sign up for our mailing list, or you can support the show financially over on Patreon. And if you think somebody might enjoy this episode, somebody might like the podcast, share it with them. If you're in a Facebook group of people who are into this stuff, go ahead and share it there too. The best way to grow things is to share what we love. Enjoy today's chat with Matt Burns from Smartpunk Records.
Hell yeah. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right, man. Sorry about that. I've never used this platform before, so I was like, walking through it, I was like, am I doing the right thing? I don't know. So
we
made it.
Good. I made the switch after there was a point after like lockdowns had dissipated when Zoom was like, okay, now you have to pay if you want to record anything over 40 minutes. And I was like,
yeah.
Oh, fuck that. Like, I was like, there's a low budget operation over here. So what can I use that I'm not paying?
No, dude, absolutely. I mean, we typically do, I think, the Google Meet for a lot of stuff, but it's been super buggy with that shit. Like, I do feel like Zoom is pretty superior in what they're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to pay $15 a month or $16 a month for like shit that I do for fun.
Right. And like, most of the time I'm not recording over 40 minutes, but those moments I do, I'm just like, really wish I had that extra time without having to like restart a meeting. It's a pain in the ass.
I was on a call Monday or Tuesday of this week, and the dude's like, yeah, let's set up a Zoom. So I'm like, okay, I'll do Zoom instead of a Google Meet. And we're talking, and we were like in the thick of the meeting, and it's like, you have 2 minutes left. I'm like, fuck. So I went in and I paid for a month because it was like of importance. Meeting. And I'm just like, well, here it goes. $16 just like lighting it on fire. That could be awesome. Whatever, but alas, here we are. So hopefully everything works out in that business venture and it'll all be worth it. But if not, I'm fucked. So.
Yeah. You're down in Florida? Is that where you're located?
Yeah, Orlando. Nice, hot, sweaty, middle of November and still 90 degrees outside Orlando.
I mean, up until like literally like 3 days ago, it was still like 80 degrees up here in DC. So it was like the same. And then it was like, oh yeah, no, it's cold now.
At least you guys do get like a little bit of seasons and like leaves change and stuff. It's for here, it's hot. And then like here's less hot for 3 or 4 weeks. And then like, okay, it's hot again.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
My garden likes it, not so much me though.
Yeah. Were you born in Florida or were you transported?
Yeah. So I'm from South Florida originally, like a small town between like Fort Lauderdale, Miami. Grew up there and moved to Orlando to go to school. Dropped out, moved back to South Florida to do some shit, left there to go work at a recording studio in Lakeland, which is like between Orlando and Tampa. And then finally came back to Orlando after a couple of years over there, and I've been here ever since. So
nice.
This is like where I'm planting my roots, I guess.
Yeah. Why Orlando?
I don't know. I came up here for school, and it was fun, and a bunch of friends were up here, and I just kind of like started getting involved in the community up here.
Yep.
And I just kind of felt like both my wife and I, like her friends were up here too, and we just felt that this was kind of like the new home, I guess.
Yeah.
We Lakeland is a very interesting area where it's like super artsy and progressive for like half of it, but the other half is very like kind of white supremacy and racist or like
great.
meth addicts and stuff. Yeah, so you get some like really cool shit from out of there, but also just totally fucked up people as well. So we got out of there, came to Orlando, and it's fun. It's cool here. We got a good scene here. We got a bunch of people trying to make a change and do some cool shit, and glad to be a part of it however we can.
Yeah, that's cool. It's got to be tough, like having lived my entire life in the Northeast and in like very liberal areas. Like I just can't imagine. Like we talked after lockdowns ended, we were like, we can move anywhere. Should we move to Florida? We were like, we're on DeSantis. No, fuck that.
I mean, that is it. Like, and it sucks because, I've always been in very liberal parts of Florida pretty much my whole life. Or like even my friend group is like the liberal people in a progressive or in a conservative town kind of shit. So it's like very echo chambery. Yeah. So like, when we see the results of like, not to get super political about it, but when we see the results of the election shit, we're like, holy shit. Like I thought this was not going to end up this way. It's like, oh yeah, I'm in like my bubble, my blue bubble is here. Yeah. So I get it, man. It's fucking crazy. But where'd you live before DC?
I grew up just outside DC, and then we lived in Philadelphia for a few years. Yeah. So that was great. I mean, Philadelphia has its white supremacy parts too, but like, of course, everywhere does, right?
I do feel like there's no place that's safe. It's like everything does have a little shit with it, even if it's like a very progressive kind of place.
Yeah, for sure. What was growing up in Florida like?
It was pretty sweet. Like, my oldest brother, who's 8 years older than me, kind of got me into music. Like he showed me like Green Day and like Smashing Pumpkins and 311, and he was kind of like, he was in the marching band, so he was in a ska band like in high school and stuff like that. So he got me into like Real Big Fish and Mighty Mighty Bosstones, everything like that. And then I would say like when I was 12, I think I started going to shows and stuff, like local shows. And one of like my big like aha moment was I went to, it was Newfound Glory, Saves the Day, Face to Face, and Alkaline Trio was opening at the time. Right. And it was at a 600 cap venue here in town. And I saw Saves the Day and I was just like blown away. Like as a 12-year-old, I was like, this band is like next level. Yeah. And I bought their CD and listened to it like on repeat that night, like on my little boombox in my room. And I had an acoustic guitar because like my parents play music, my brother plays music, obviously. So like I always had this like little guitar in my room, and like I started like picking it up and like playing along to the Saves the Day record, and I was like, oh shit, like this is what I want to do. Like This is cool. Like here's just like, they were probably like late teens, maybe early 20s at the time in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. So it's like, oh, there's like kids that are like doing this thing, they're traveling, and like I was just so like wowed by the whole thing. And that was when I was like, this is what I want to do. And I like started writing songs like shortly thereafter, like really, really bad fucking shit. But, recording it I had a 4-track, and I was like doing that. And at the same time, like Dashboard Confessional was getting big. So I'd like he's got an acoustic and making music. Like, I'm going to try to do that. Obviously the, talent level is very different there. But no, I mean, it was a very cool thing. Like I was a young kid going to like these hardcore shows and ska shows and punk shows, and like I didn't feel left out, which was great. I like going to high school, I was friends with like a couple of the seniors and stuff just from my brothers, and like they kind of like brought me into their crew, and like we'd go to shows, and like it was just a really cool experience. And just like getting to be involved in the South Florida music scene like was awesome. We ended up not having so many venues to play towards like the end of my high school years. My dad and I actually ran an all ages venue down in South Florida, which is really cool. And that kind of like started after high school. But just seeing the scene, and like, I mean, predominantly hardcore, a lot of like metalcore, stuff like that. But also punk bands would come through. It's way different now because it's so expensive to, I think, travel into Florida. And, even if people do, like, they'll go into maybe Orlando and like back up, but South Florida didn't really have a ton going on. So it's like they kind of cultivated their own thing. It's like this is predominantly like South Florida. And that's why I think you see Newfound Glory always like touting like kind of where they're coming from, because it's like that was the only thing that we kind of had, was like it was Shai Hulud and Newfound Glory and Further Since Forever and Rocking Horse Winter and like all these like kind of weird things in between. But those were the shows, is that it was just like a mixed genre bill, and like everyone was friends with each other, and or not, or there was often fights and shit like that. But for the most part, the ones that I went to, everyone was pretty friendly. But it was cool. Yeah, liked it a lot.
It seems like Florida, I mean, at least for the last 40 years or so, like the music scene's gone in ebbs and flows, but like whether it's like the death metal stuff into the punk stuff into the metalcore, and now it seems like there's a real thriving metal deathcore scene happening in Florida again.
Yeah,
like it's
absolutely.
Like, it's just like it's always happening. Something's always going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've got our own thing going on, much in the same way that like Long Island, New Jersey, Philly has like their thing. You know what I mean? It's like the early days of like Drive-Thru Records. It's like every band that was like doing shit in like that tri-state area was like signed to Drive-Thru. So it's like early November, Census Fail, like and Starting Line and like all that stuff, and they tour with like Thursday and all these other bands. It's like really cool to be a part of like that kind of community and family, I feel like. So we in our own little bubble down here had a thing going on, which was awesome. Poison the Well from down there, and like that was a huge thing for me growing up, is like seeing that band and just like what they did. And that was like my first time seeing like a hardcore metalcore band, and like what like all the kids like dancing in the breakdowns and stuff. I was like, that was very new to me as like a pop punk kid. And it's just like, it was awesome. It was really fucking cool to be like, oh, these guys are fighting. Oh no, they're like doing a thing and like respecting each other. And they're very cool. A lot of really cool organizations tabling at shows and like just shit like that. Like really a really cool punk ethos growing up there in like the underground scene. And I haven't been back to South Florida in quite a while, so I don't even know what's going on there. I know a buddy of mine still books some shows in like Miami and stuff, but it definitely feels a little bit, I feel disconnected from it. So I hope it's still doing well and thriving. But
even the scene in general, like I go to shows, and I mean, I'm talking to bands all the time, so I know what's like happening at a label level, but like I don't know like if VFW shit is still happening, like house shows. It's like I'm sure it is, but I'm just like, if it's not, how sad for like kids, where it's like if you got to go to like a club these days, it's a whole different vibe. And like,
and I think it is kind of like a ebb and flow thing, because like I feel like in South Florida there's like one or two venues, so it's like kids are forced to have house shows or forced to like find a place that will rent them this like a maybe
pizza parlor or something.
Yeah, exactly. That'll rent them the space for like a little bit of money, and it's like, okay, well now we're throwing shows here. Or there's like some gymnasiums in Orlando that kids are throwing like hardcore shows at. I'm like, this shit is fucking, like we have venues here, but it's like, it's fucking cool that these kids are finding this place, making it a venue, like renting a PA or buying a PA and like returning it after the show and like throwing a show and like building their own scene.
Yeah.
Because to me, like, there's nothing more punk rock than that. And like they're creating their own community, like they're building the change they want to see. And I think that's so fucking cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and they have a much easier, I'd hate to say social network, but a much easier way to form those social networks to connect with people and create that.
You're not flying at malls. And hoping that somebody going outside a Hot Topic and being like, I hope this person likes this kind of music. I hope that we can talk and connect, and a little bit easier, I think.
Yeah, for sure. At what point in going to shows and playing in bands and like playing shows, do you develop maybe an interest in like distro or merch or label or recording? Like, where does all of that come along in your trajectory? Was that later?
So I guess recording started earlier because like my first band, we were kind of recording ourselves. My drummer was in another band and they had like recorded at like studios and stuff like that. But we were like, oh, we're not like good enough. We're not big enough to do that. So we started like recording ourselves at home and like we would collect a little bit of money and we would buy like some kind of like DAW at the time and like record on like an 8-track or 16-track and like then we would press it to CD and we'd go to like our Kinkos and like make a bunch of CDs and like that's what we did then. And I just kind of like started at the turn of like when you can kind of start recording yourself on a computer. I had like, gotten myself a little audio workstation and like a couple of mics and like I started doing that whole thing. And then I got the opportunity when I recorded with another band over in Lakeland. I just like hit it off with the team over there and they offered me a position to kind of like start working there and doing social media and like manage the studio. But also I got to like go in and like help engineer and like I was doing drum edits and vocal edits. And I love that stuff. Like at times I could be very granular and like in it and like looking at very little wave files and doing that whole thing, which is awesome. Yeah. Other times I'm just bouncing off the walls. But yeah, I had never been in the like music business side until I kind of started at Smartpunk, which I even started here doing social media and mail order. And my buddy Alex, who's still here, he had worked at a record store for a pretty long time. And like he brought his like sense of distro kind of over to what we were doing. And Jordan, who's here as well, kind of was like the one who at the very beginning, even before I was involved, was like reaching out to like Asian men and being like, hey, can we distro your records? Like here, we're this little like online record store. Can we do this? And like very grassroots kind of thing, which I think is super humbling to kind of understand now that I'm like more in the thick of it and dealing with like way bigger distros and like what that process looks like. But just like the cool kind of like emailing or calling somebody up on a phone to be like, hey, I see you're putting this out. Like we'd love to get 5 copies and, go from there and like do consignment or something like that. So it started with that kind of like super small reaching out to see what we can do and how we can grow, then became more of like now this is becoming a thing. We were popping up at events and doing like, here's a mobile record store kind of at Wrecking Ball or Riot Fest or something like that. So we'd have to be like, okay, well, shit, we need to spend a couple $1,000s and buy some records so people come here and buy records.
Yeah.
And yeah, just like one thing kind of like starts fumbling into the next. And, now we're an online store with thousands of records. We're doing our own label. We're doing exclusives where we partner with other labels. And I think we got a really cool network going on with like what we're doing. It's pretty sweet.
At what point did the label side kind of pop up? I think in my head, I had always kind of confused Smartpunk and Interpunk.
Like, oh yeah, dude, we get that all the time. Yeah.
Kind of doing the same thing. And so when I started working with Tori, and she was like, "Yeah, they're signed to Smartpunk," I was like, "That's a label."
Right. I mean, even as Smartpunk now, people are like, "You guys are a record label," which shows that I'm not doing a great job at what I'm supposed to be doing. But no, I mean, Smartpunk as a whole, like if we're going back 20-ish years where they had the stage at Warped Tour and they're doing like the online, they're specifically like online distribution for signed bands, unsigned bands, whatever.
Yeah.
And my old band, we used to have our CDs up in Smartpunk and Interpunk both. Which is, it's all the full circle stuff that happens is crazy. But yeah, it was, I think, 2016 that the team put out, they reissued a Game Face record and they reissued Set Your Goals Mutiny. And I think that was kind of like the first foray into like record label. Like, here's our catalog numbers. Here's stuff that we're pressing these. We're not getting them from somebody else.
Yeah.
And it was also like we're putting out a couple of local bands in Orlando, and like pretty much everyone that works here is in a band. So like we're putting out our own records, and it just kind of like slowly became, we're putting out ads out in New Noise, or we're putting ads out at Alt Press, and like people start seeing the name again, and bands are hitting us up being like, hey, we love like your stage at Warped Tour. Like, we'd love to be signed to the label. And it's kind of like, oh, well, that's not really like us anymore. Like, our parent company bought the company out, and we're like keeping the name going. But it's kind of like a new thing now. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to be like, this company came from like the Warped Tour era of like punk rock and music. Mm-hmm. And I still feel like our ethos are kind of in that, like if Warped Tour was still a traveling festival, I would like to think that we're there with our 10 by 10 tent every summer, just fucking shoveling shit with everyone else and hanging out with all the bands and doing that thing.
Yeah. At what point does the label kind of go? Do you look at like you're doing these reissues to like, okay, maybe we should be signing bands and putting new stuff out? Or did it just start with, we could put our own stuff out because we have this platform, and then that kind of snowballs into, oh, they are doing new bands, even though it's just your bands?
I think it was that. I think like it started with, hey, we're putting our own bands out. And it's like, then you could be like, hey, here's the 4 records we like Smartpunk put out this year. And it's like, oh, that's like Brick Kid, that's Teenagers. Like, that is all of our protagonists. That's like all of our bands and our friends.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like we're signing local bands that are like touring more, and like younger bands that are like doing stuff.
Yeah.
And I want to say one of our bigger, like, I think Rivals was the first band that we signed that was like outside of the like close friends group. And it was still like we got to know them through friends and like through one of our bands and a band that they were touring with. They were managed at the time by one of these guys. And like, that's how the conversation started. But I feel like Rivals was the first one that was like outside of our group that we brought on. And it just like caught like wildfire. Like, everything they were doing was just crushing online, and they're still doing phenomenal things. And I think that was the point where it's like, oh, cool. Like, we could maybe do this for real. And, from that, I want to say Alive in Barcelona came not too far after that. And like just other bands that were like outside of our Florida group or Florida network that were reaching out, or like friends of friends who were like, hey, this is what we're doing. And I'd like to think that what we offer bands is super artist friendly. And I think that is kind of like what gravitates us to a lot of these bands that we're working with, where it's like, we may not be as big as some of the other independent labels in our scene. But, that might be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on like what you're kind of looking for. So I think it is just what we were able to offer was like working for some of these bands at the time, and just kind of grew from there. And we're looking at, we're in our 150th release and start of the label, which is like insane to think about.
Yeah.
And I want to say probably the last 100 came in with like since the pandemic, or like right before pandemic. So like over the last 5 years, we've done like over 100 records, which is fucking nuts to say.
Yeah.
It's proper like bands that we're looking to grow, or bands that we are growing with, and then a bunch of these reissue titles that like we are working with these major labels and getting these deals, and then going back and working with the bands and a lot of these bands have never seen money from the music that they made. So it's like, hey, here's a way that like we're looking to repress this to vinyl. Maybe it's never been on vinyl, maybe it hasn't been on vinyl in a while, but we'd love to like cut you into the process. Like, we want to get your okay.
Yeah.
First and foremost, like, we want to make sure it's cool with you guys. Second of all, like, do you want to reimagine the packaging? Like, was there anything about this that you'd like to update?
Yeah.
And kind of just work with them on that. And then like, once everything's paid off and there's money to be made, we split it with those bands, and everyone kind of wins, or everyone loses. That's kind of the way the label is. It's we all win or we all lose together. So
yeah,
we're in the shit.
Yeah. So speaking of all winning and all losing, like just in this conversation we've had, you come from this hardcore underground punk rock DIY scene, starting as a distribution platform into a record label. Obviously the last, decade, but maybe more the last 5 years, the record industry has absolutely gotten waylaid and like has gone so much on streaming and digital and YouTube and TikTok and all that. Like, how does that change your approach to releasing music, or does it at all where you're just like, we're a punk label who puts out vinyl, like fuck it, like we can't get wrapped up in all this other stuff? Or is there someone at the label who is more like social media streaming conscious? Like,
it's all of it. It's all of it together. We do have someone here who is of the younger generation who understands what the verbiage is, and I have to be like, Danielle, what the fuck does any of this mean? Like, and she is very gracious to hold my hand and talk me through everything, which is awesome. It's hard because, like, you know, at the heart of it, it's like, for me, we were doing stuff kind of before social media. Like, MySpace was like getting big towards like while I was already in a band, but like I started and I was on a street team. Like, that's what I knew. And that was like how I got to know about records coming out, or, you know, even I was on the Vagrant Records street team. I was on the Fueled by Ramen street team, like all this stuff. And they'd be like, hey, here's a comp with a bunch of songs from upcoming releases. Like, go out to shows and hand this out. It's like, cool. And they're like, we'll get you into the show. Like, you do this. It's like, perfect. I will work for that. And, it's a little bit different, but I think I only feel it's different because like that's what was normal for me. And I think now it's normal to like have a Discord and talk to your fans via Discord or newsletter, or like artists may have a stronger presence on whatever platform they have. And it's like, I need to be able to change my ways for that. Like, if we have an artist that has a strong TikTok platform, I want to be able to nurture that community that they've built and be like, okay, cool, you have this already. How do we market it to get more people involved? Like, what do we have to do? How do we bring people from like Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, whatever the fuck, to come over here? And then also, how do we, when you're out on tour, how do we get people to come to your shows? And like, what are we doing to target people who might like band X, Y, and Z, who are your influences, and get them to come to a show to be like, oh, that's like the VFW Hall version of the Front Bottoms or something. You know what I mean? So it's both. And then at the end of the day, we are a punk label. We press almost everything to vinyl. So like, we want you out on the road selling your records, and like, you're going to see a good return on that. And that's like how you're growing your, what we like to call super fans, and getting people to be a passive listener on whatever streaming platform of choice, to be like following you on social media, joining your community, coming to a show, falling in love with your band, buying your merch, buying the records, whatever, telling their friends about it. And next time you come to town, it's like, hey, you guys are awesome. Like, I brought my 3 friends and we all like had a great time. And like, those 4 people then become 16, become, 32, 64, whatever. And it's like growth that way. Like, I feel like that organic growth is kind of what I cut my teeth on, and infusing that with the possibility where the internet and marketing now, like, there almost is no limit. Like, you can reach literally almost anyone in the entire world. So like, why would you not try to navigate those platforms? And it's I talk with some people at labels who are like, nope, we make records, our bands go on tour, they sell records, that's how we make our money, like, fuck streaming. And then there's obviously a lot of labels who are like, we only deal with streaming. And it's like even distro deals where it's like, we don't make physical records at all. Our bands don't even play shows. They're like bedroom pop, and all they do is create music and content and stuff like that. And it's like, they're both right. Like, whatever works for you and however is true to what you're trying to do and the audience you're trying to reach, there's no wrong answer. So that's how I feel about it. I'm trying to infuse both as best as I know how, and bring people into the team and into the fold that understand these, what are my weaknesses and their strengths, and they can kind of help the team and stuff like that. Yeah.
It's important for sure. I see both sides of it as
I mean, streaming doesn't pay shit, but it's like, you don't have to really pay any money to have income come in. Like, if you have like, you go to DistroKid and you upload your record and you become like, there's some virality to what you're doing, and you're starting to stream millions and millions of songs. Like that's just money that you didn't really have to put out to like you didn't have to press a CD or press vinyl to get that. But it's still like, you'll make what you can make off selling one CD, you would make off streaming like a couple thousand times.
Yeah.
So it's hard, but that's the world we're living in.
Yeah. You guys also have Smartpunk Manufacturing now, kind of a in-house one-stop shop. I see you guys even do vinyl. What led to that? Was the inspiration for that?
I think it was just kind of like the fact that, we're doing this day to day anyway. Like, we're pressing records, every day. I'm talking to my rep at our pressing plant, and, we're making CDs, we're making cassettes. We're owned by a merch printing company. So it's kind of like, we already have all this stuff. Why are we not like offering these services to, we offer it to every band on our label, but it's like, why are we not also offering it to bands in our community that aren't on our label, or out there that aren't on a label? Because it's if I wasn't doing this every day, I would have no fucking idea what to do about pressing a record. And I could read every FAQ out there and see like what colors are doing what, but I'd be like, I don't know how music comes out of a record. It still blows my mind to be like, I know there's grooves in this thing, but how's it also drums and guitar and vocals and like this little minute cut?
Right.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was just like hey, we're doing this stuff already. Like, why don't we try to have it be a different income stream, so that like when we do go to these festivals, we could like start sponsoring festivals on that side. And like, we're printing merch for festivals, and in lieu, we get to have our pop-up record store there. And it's kind of like all symbiotic for each other. And it just kind of helps the overall brand, I think.
Yeah. You get to have your hands in a bunch of different fires. And if something is not working at one point, record sales are down. You got manufacturing going on.
Record sales are down, but t-shirt printing is up. Or t-shirt printing is down and record sales are up. And it's hopefully one day they'll both be very high, but it's all a balance. And it really does help with a lot of stuff, because like having the ability to print merch for our bands, we're able to get our bands good prices. And even stuff like when we do reissues, like when we did the Swellers record, we got to print some merch for them and put out shirts like with that record. And like working with them, they're like, oh, we really like this one design we did. Can we bring that back? And it's like, yeah, cool. And they're like, oh, well, we always had this idea to do something like this for a shirt. Can we do that? And it's like, sure. Like, I don't fucking care. We could do that. Screen printing our own test press jackets. Like, that's a fun thing. I think having that also, like that level of DIY where it's like our warehouse that we print everything is kind of 100 feet away from me. But to be able to like put my hands and be like, this is the art that I'm creating. Like, it's not music, but it's still just as important. I feel like there's a lot of conversations that I have with kids where it's like, hey, I can't play music, but I really want to like be involved. It's like, all right, well, you could make flyers, you could take photos, you could do like videography. Like, there's so many things that you can do in the music scene and be a part of your community and be integral part of your community, where you don't have to, you could be tone deaf. It doesn't even matter. And I think that like sharing that knowledge with people is pretty cool, because it's like, there are so many parts of this music industry that are outside of being an artist themselves. It's very much in the Discord, ethos of just like, absolutely,
we don't need somebody else to do it. Fuck it, it's more economical to do it ourselves, right? Like,
I mean, looking at like as far back as like a Discord or Lookout, to like No Idea Records here in Florida, to even stuff like what Asian Man is still doing. Like, Mike is still shipping everything out of his parents' house and stuff. Like, that's fucking awesome. And it's like him posting those videos of him and his mom doing it. I'm like, that is punk rock, capital PR. Like, it's sick as hell.
I mean, MXPX, Mike Herrera's mom ships everything. Like, it's just like,
she's signing all those checks and puts the little MXPX letterhead. I'm like, this is fucking awesome.
It's great.
That'll never get lost on me. The fact that like my my heroes, the people that like got me into doing what I'm doing, are still like at the ground level doing everything themselves. Even like Brett Gurewitz answering emails when I'm trying to work on Epitaph stuff. I'm like, you have a billion things you could be doing aside from emailing me, but like this is crazy. Or like we've done a couple of things like with Blasting Room where we're getting records mixed and mastered there, and like Bill emails me back. I'm like, you're Bill Stevenson. Like, what are you doing emailing me? This is like a fucking crazy thing. And I remember the first like email I got back from him, like I just like screenshot it and I would just like look at it and be like, how did I get to the point where like I am on a professional email with the drummer from the Descendants, like the guy who like is responsible for almost everything that I exist as right now is talking to me. It's just a pinch myself kind of moment. Yeah.
It's very cool. You guys survived the pandemic. This year's just about done. What's the future look like for the label? Are there things you're hoping to accomplish that you haven't done yet, or just continue to just keep on keeping on?
Both. Unfortunately, I'm always like, this is cool, but what else? Like it's very much like the improv comedy, like the yes and mentality, where I'm like, oh, this year was great. How do we do it again and better? And I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? Like I'm already stretched thin. Our team is stretched thin, but I always feel like there's more that we can do. Like there's more people out there who still say, oh, Smartpunk, you're a record label. Like I didn't know that. It's like, fuck, I got to go back and like I got to revisit all those people. So yeah, we've got a couple signings that we're working on and records that we're doing and reissues. Like we were looking at our calendar earlier this week, and we already have over 20 records that we're putting out in 2025 between like new releases and reissues, which is insane.
That's a lot. Yeah,
about. It's a lot, and it's like I kind of get very overwhelmed about it, and I'm like, okay, well, that means, there's 12 months in a year. We have 20 records. That averages out to almost 2 records a month. Am I giving enough time in between to like talk about it and sell it all? And we're not like constantly hitting up our customers to be like, buy this record, buy this record, buy this record.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like the people that are going to buy the records will do it kind of whenever they're able to.
Yeah.
They'll be into it or they won't. We could push our records however we can and the best of our ability, and really like we got to take it day by day. We're getting involved in doing more events. Like last year we did an unofficial South by Southwest showcase that was 2 days out in Austin. We're going to be doing something like that again next year. I think doing kind of like throwing shows or mini festivals or whatever is something that we all kind of like to do, and like we're all kind of like in that world also. So it's like, why don't we do, we call it Smart Punk House. Why don't we do like a Smart Punk House in Chicago, like next year, or in Boston, like rent out Middle East for a night or two and like throw a little show. And it's exhausting. And we do it to ourselves, and it's so much stress leading up to it. And then like after the first hour or two that things are like on sale or this event is happening, we're finally able to be like, oh shit, we did it. This is like a really cool moment. Like, let's take it all in and just enjoy it before we go read the comments and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So expanding on what we're doing. We recently closed our brick and mortar here in Orlando because of rising rent prices, and the kind of the area that it was in was just always under construction and sucked for foot traffic. So we're shopping for a new spot to do that. Okay. So maybe next year will be a reopening of our brick and mortar. Maybe it'll be 2 years. Who knows? There's always something that we're working on, and whatever we're working on from last year, we're tinkering to try to like figure out how we can do it again or do it better, and really just do right by artists and grow this community in a positive manner. I really believe on like leaving everything better than you found it. And I really want to instill that kind of in everything we do every day. Is like, whenever we do throw a show, I love to get like local charities involved, because it's like, we're here taking up your space, but I want to make sure that like you guys are here and able to have a platform. And if it is a thing that we're bringing in people from all over or even locally to come in, like you have a voice and you can talk to these people about what you find is important. Yeah. I think that stuff like the Plea for Peace tour and Food Not Bombs and like all these things were at these shows, like when I was growing up, made such a positive impact to me that I want to like try to pay it forward with however I can.